The basement door stood open at the bottom of the stairs, and the fireproof safe sat on the concrete floor like a stone that had always been there. Leonard had pried the false panel away with a crowbar at 3:17 in the morning, his arthritic hands shaking so badly he dropped the tool twice. The panel had been in place since 1983, nailed over the same spot where he now stood, and when it fell, the sound echoed through the empty house like a gunshot, but nobody came. Nobody was there to hear it. The safe was smaller than he remembered, black, heavy. The dial spun smooth under his thumb, same combination he'd used for 41 years, his father's birthday backwards. He turned it slow, feeling each number click into place, and when the handle finally gave, he pulled the door open and saw the stack of 20s and 50s, the deed, the envelope, the letter he had written in 2012 and sealed and never mentioned to a living soul. He sat down on the cold floor and read his own words, and that was where Helen found him 20 minutes later, still holding the pages, still wearing his coat from the night before, the house silent around them and their children gone, but they had not always been gone. The children had come on a Tuesday in November. Leonard had known it would be a Tuesday because Michael always scheduled difficult conversations for Tuesdays. Something about the middle of the week gave him leverage, or so he believed. Michael was 46 now, a commercial real estate broker with an office in a glass building downtown, a wife who drove a Mercedes, and 2 children in private school. He wore a Patagonia vest over a blue button-down, even indoors, even to his parents' house, as if he might need to go hiking at any moment. He had never gone hiking in his life. Samantha arrived second, pulling into the driveway at 10:14 in her gray BMW. She was 43, a partner at a law firm, and she carried a leather briefcase that cost more than Leonard's first car. She kissed Helen on the cheek and said, "You look tired, Mom," which was how Samantha always started conversations with a diagnosis nobody asked for. Kevin came last, 15 minutes late, apologizing before he even got through the door. He was 38, the youngest, an engineer who had never quite made the money his siblings had, though he had never seemed to want it. He drove a 2010 Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and wore a sweater Helen had bought him 3 Christmases ago. He hugged his father first, then his mother, and Leonard noticed that Kevin did not sit down at the kitchen table with the others. He stood by the counter, arms crossed, watching. The kitchen had been remodeled in 2006. Helen had wanted new cabinets, and Leonard had agreed, because she had spent 32 years in a dental office leaning over patients, and if she wanted cherry wood cabinets with brushed nickel pulls, she would have them. The countertops were granite, a deep brown with flecks of gold, and the table where the family had eaten thousands of meals was oak, scarred in one corner where Kevin had dropped a cast iron skillet in 1994. That scar had never been repaired. Helen refused to let anyone sand it down. Michael sat at the head of the table. He had always taken the head of the table, even when his father was present. Leonard sat across from him, and Helen sat to his left, and Samantha opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers and placed them on the scarred oak like she was setting down a medical chart. "We need to talk about the house," Samantha said. Leonard said nothing. He had been expecting this conversation for 3 years, ever since Michael had first mentioned estate planning at Christmas dinner, using the phrase like a surgeon discussing a tumor he was eager to remove. "You're both in your 70s, Samantha continued. "The property taxes on this house are absurd. The market is at an all-time high. If we don't start transferring assets now, the tax burden is going to eat everything when you pass." Helen's hand moved to the small framed photograph on the windowsill. It was a picture of her first dental office, taken in 1977. The building was nothing special, a brick storefront on Main Street with a sign that read, Helen R. Morrison, DDS, in gold lettering. She had worked there for 11 years before joining the group practice where she met Martha and Louise, and where she would eventually retire. The frame was silver, tarnished now, and she touched it the way other people touched rosary beads. "Your father and I are still here," Helen said quietly. "Of course you are," Michael said, leaning forward. "That's exactly the point. We want to protect what you've built. If we wait, the government takes half, Mom. Do you know how much work went into this house?" Leonard knew exactly how much work had gone into the house. He had framed the basement walls himself in 1981, working evenings after 12-hour shifts at the factory. He had laid the tile in the bathroom, installed the water heater, built the deck in the backyard with lumber he had hauled from a mill in Pennsylvania because it was cheaper than the hardware store. He had painted every room twice, once when they moved in and again in 1995, and he had fixed the roof after the storm of 2003, standing on a ladder at 62 years old with shingles in his hands and rain on his face. 2 million, Samantha said. That's what the appraisal came back at last month. 2 million for the house and the land, and you bought it for 73,000. In 1978, Leonard said, the year you were born. Samantha did not acknowledge this. She slid a document across the table, and Leonard saw the word trust in bold letters at the top. This is an irrevocable trust, she said. You transfer the house and the land into the trust now. You retain life estate. You can live here until the last of you passes. But the property is no longer yours. It belongs to the trust, to all three of us equally. And if we don't sign? Leonard asked. Michael's jaw tightened. Then when you die, we pay capital gains on the appreciation. We pay estate tax. We pay probate. It could cost us 6 figures, Dad. 6 figures that should be ours. The word hung in the air like smoke. Ours. Helen's fingers stopped moving on the photograph. She looked at her eldest son, and Leonard saw something in her eyes that he had not seen in 47 years of marriage. Not anger. Not sadness. Recognition. Those papers? Helen said slowly. They've been notarized already. Samantha blinked. What? There's a notary stamp at the bottom. And the date is last week. You had these prepared before you asked us. Kevin spoke from the counter. I didn't know about that. But you knew about this meeting, Leonard said. Kevin's face reddened. I knew there was a meeting. I didn't know what was in the papers. It's standard procedure, Samantha said, and her voice had sharpened now, losing the smooth professional tone she had walked in with. We had them drafted. We brought them for signatures. That's how estate planning works. Estate planning, Leonard repeated. I'm 74 years old. I still mow my own lawn. I still change the oil in my truck. I am not an estate. Michael stood up. He pushed his chair back and walked to the window, and Leonard saw his son's reflection in the glass, the same jaw, the same brow, the same stubborn set of the mouth. Michael had been a beautiful baby. All three of them had been beautiful babies. Leonard had held each one in the delivery room, had cut the cords, had cried when the nurses placed them in Helen's arms. He had worked overtime, double shifts, weekends, to pay for their clothes and their schools and their braces and their college tuitions, and he had never once complained, because that was what fathers did. The trust protects the assets from nursing home costs, Michael said, still facing the window. If either of you gets sick, Medicaid will take everything. The house, the savings, everything. We're trying to stop that. We have insurance, Helen said. Insurance doesn't cover everything. Then we'll sell the house and pay for care ourselves. And lose it all? Michael turned around. Everything you worked for. Mom, I'm trying to save what you built. Why won't you let me save it? Leonard looked at his son, and for a moment he saw something he had never noticed before. A crack in the facade. A flicker of desperation beneath the confidence. Michael was not just greedy. He was afraid of losing something he believed was already his. But that did not make it right. We'll think about it, Leonard said. Samantha's mouth opened, then closed. Michael's hands went to his hips, that gesture he had copied from some television lawyer, and he said, Dad, there's nothing to think about. There's always something to think about. We're trying to help you. Then help us by giving us time. The kitchen was silent. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the wall, the same clock that had been there since 1987, ticked forward 1 second, then another. Samantha gathered the papers and put them back in her briefcase. We'll come back on Thursday, she said. That gives you 2 days. Please, Mom. Dad. Think about it seriously. She kissed Helen on the cheek again, and Michael shook Leonard's hand the way he shook everyone's hand, firm, brief, professional, and Kevin hugged his mother and said he was sorry, though he did not specify for what. And then they were gone, their cars pulling out of the driveway, the sound of their engines fading down the street. The house was quiet again. Helen sat at the table with her hands folded in front of her, and Leonard sat across from her, and neither of them spoke for a long time. The framed photograph of the dental office stood on the windowsill, catching the afternoon light, and Leonard's clipboard, his old foreman's clipboard, the one with every worker's name he had ever supervised written in his own hand, hung on a hook by the basement door, where it had hung for 40 years. He called us an estate, Helen said. I heard. He doesn't see us. He sees numbers. Leonard reached across the table and took his wife's hand. Her fingers were stiff from arthritis, the same arthritis that had ended her career 5 years early, the same arthritis that made her wince when she gripped the steering wheel on cold mornings. They don't know. Know what? About the safe. Helen looked at him. She had known about the safe for 41 years. She had helped him install it, had held the flashlight while he bolted it to the floor, had watched him build the false panel from scrap wood and plasterboard. She knew about the cash and the deed and the letter, because she had been there when he wrote it, sitting at the kitchen table in 2012 with a pen in his hand and tears in his eyes. "Are you going to show them?" she asked. "No. Then what are we going to do?" Leonard looked at the clipboard on the wall. He had been a foreman at the foundry for 23 years, and on his first day, the old foreman, a man named Charlie Russo, who had worked at the plant since 1947, had handed him a clipboard and said, "You write their names down. Every man who works for you. You write their names, and you remember them, because one day you're going to be the only one who does." He had done it. Every name, every year, every man. 218 names in total. Some of them were dead now. Some of them had retired and moved away. Some of them still called him on his birthday, still came by the house at Christmas with a bottle of whiskey and a story about the old days. The clipboard was not worth anything. It was wood and metal and paper, held together by a spring clip that had rusted in places. But it was real. It was proof that he had been here, that he had worked, that he had mattered. On Thursday, Leonard said, "We're going to tell them no." Helen squeezed his hand. "And then what?" "Then we're going to see what they do." Thursday came, and the children did not. Michael called at 6 p.m., his voice tight and clipped, apologizing for the reschedule. A deal had come up, a commercial property in the next county, and he had to be there in person. Samantha sent a text message, 3 emojis and a promise to circle back next week. Kevin drove over alone on Friday morning, sat at the kitchen table, and told his parents that he was sorry for what had happened, that he had not known about the notarized papers, that he thought Michael and Samantha were moving too fast. "But they're not wrong about the taxes," Kevin said. "The house is worth a lot. If something happens, the government really will take a huge chunk. Then we'll deal with it when it happens," Leonard said. Kevin looked at his hands. He had his mother's eyes, gray-green, and his father's broad shoulders. He was a good man, Leonard thought, a decent man. But he was also a man who had never learned to say no to his older siblings. "I love you both," Kevin said. "I don't want you to feel pressured. But I also don't want you to lose everything." "We won't," Helen said. "How do you know?" "Because we've never lost anything that mattered." Kevin left at noon, and Helen closed the door behind him and leaned against it, her eyes closed, her breath slow and steady. Leonard came up behind her and put his hands on her shoulders, and she reached up and covered his hands with her own. "They're going to come back," she said. "I know. With more papers. More lawyers. I know. And when we say no again, they're going to get angry." Leonard kissed the top of her head. "Let them." The first week of December brought snow. Leonard woke at 5:30 a.m., the same time he had woken for 50 years, and shuffled to the kitchen in his slippers. The house was cold. The furnace was old, and the windows were drafty, and he had not replaced them because the cost was too high, and the children had told him not to spend money on investments that don't appreciate. He made coffee, black, and sat at the table with the newspaper, and he pretended that everything was normal. But nothing was normal. The phone rang at 9:15. Michael. Leonard let it go to voicemail, and when he listened to the message, his son's voice was cheerful and clipped, like a radio host reading a commercial. "Hey, Dad. Just checking in. We need to get that trust signed before the end of the year. Tax reasons. Call me." Leonard did not call him. The phone rang again at 11 under. "Samantha." Another voicemail, this one longer, more detailed, full of phrases like capital gains exposure and stepped-up basis and fiduciary responsibility. Leonard listened to the whole thing and then deleted it. The phone rang at 2:30. Kevin. He did not leave a message. At 4 p.m., Leonard put on his coat and went to the basement. The safe was behind the false panel, hidden behind boxes of Christmas decorations and old paint cans, and he had not opened it in 6 months. He pulled the boxes aside, pried the panel loose, and spun the dial. His father's birthday, backwards. The safe opened. He took out the cash first, counting it by hand, $42,000. He had saved it over 20 years, pulling $50 from every paycheck, sometimes $100, never more than that. It was his emergency fund, and he had never told anyone about it, not even the bank. He took out the deed next, the original land deed from 1978, yellowed and fragile, signed by a man named Harold P. Morrison, who had sold them the property for $73,000 cash. Harold had been dead since 1994. Leonard had been to his funeral, and then he took out the letter. It was in a plain white envelope, sealed, addressed to whom it may concern, in Leonard's careful handwriting. He had written it in 2012 after a conversation with Michael that had left him shaking. A conversation about money. About a loan Michael had taken from his parents' savings account without asking. About a lie Michael had told to cover it up. Leonard had not confronted him. He had written the letter instead, documenting everything, and he had sealed it in the envelope and put it in the safe and never spoken of it again. He held the envelope now, feeling the weight of it, and he thought about what happened if his children found out. The trust, the house, the money. The letter, they would tear each other apart, but they were already tearing each other apart. They just did not know it yet. The second week of December brought a certified letter. Leonard signed for it at the door, and the delivery driver, a young woman with a nose ring and a kind smile, handed him the envelope and said, "Have a good day, sir." He closed the door and opened the envelope in the kitchen. The letter was from Samantha's law firm, printed on heavy bond paper with a letterhead that took up half the page. It was a notice of intent to file for conservatorship. Leonard read it 3 times before he understood what it meant. Samantha was petitioning the court to take control of his and Helen's financial affairs. She was claiming that they were no longer capable of managing their own assets. She was claiming that they were at risk of financial exploitation. She was claiming that her own parents were incompetent. Helen came in from the living room, and Leonard handed her the letter without speaking. She read it standing at the counter, her glasses on the chain around her neck, and when she finished, she set the letter down and looked at him with an expression he had never seen before. "She's doing this," Helen said. "She sent the letter. She's really doing this." Leonard nodded. "She is." Helen picked up the photograph from the windowsill, her first dental office, 1977, and held it against her chest. "I used to sit in that office," she said, "between patients, and I would look at the diploma on the wall and think, I did this. I earned this. Nobody gave it to me. I worked for it. You did. And now my daughter wants to take it away." "Not the office," Leonard said. "The house. It's the same thing." He knew she was right. The house was not just a house. It was the floor he had tiled, the deck he had built, the walls he had painted. It was the scar on the table and the clock on the wall and the clipboard by the door. It was 47 years of mornings and evenings, of arguments and reconciliations, of dinners and birthdays and Christmases and quiet nights on the couch watching television with the sound turned low. It was everything. And Samantha wanted to take it. "Call Kevin," Leonard said. "What?" "Call Kevin. Tell him to come over tonight." "Why?" "Because I need to know whose side he's on." Kevin came at 7 p.m. He read the letter in the kitchen, his face going pale as his eyes moved across the page, and when he finished, he set it down and stared at the wall for a long time. "I didn't know about this," he said. "Are you sure?" Leonard asked. "I'm sure, but you knew they were pushing. I knew they were pushing. I didn't know they were going to file a conservatorship. That's insane." "It's legal," Helen said. "Samantha told me it was legal." "It's legal," Kevin said, "but it's not right." Leonard sat down at the table. His knees ached from the cold, and his hands were stiff, and he was tired in a way that sleep could not fix. "I need you to tell me the truth, Kevin. Are you with them or with us?" Kevin looked at his father, and Leonard saw the boy he had raised, the boy who had cried when his bicycle was stolen, the boy who had graduated from engineering school with honors, the boy who had married a woman Leonard barely knew and divorced her 3 years later. He saw fear and love and confusion all mixed together, and he knew that whatever Kevin said next would change everything. "I'm with you," Kevin said, "then help us." "How?" Leonard looked at the basement door. The clipboard hung on its hook, and behind it, behind the false panel, behind the boxes and the paint cans, the safe waited. "I need you to find a lawyer," Leonard said. "A good one. Someone who doesn't work with your sister. I can do that. And I need you to keep this quiet." "I can do that too." Helen reached across the table and took Kevin's hand. "We're not going to lose the house," she said. "We're not going to lose anything. But we need you to trust us." "I do trust you." "And then we're going to tell you something," Leonard said. "And you're going to keep it secret from everyone." Kevin's eyes widened. "What is it?" Leonard stood up slowly, his joints protesting, and walked to the basement door. He took the clipboard off its hook and handed it to his son. "Do you know what this is?" "It's your old clipboard." "It's a list," Leonard said. 218 names, every man who ever worked for me." "And do you know what else it is?" "What?" "A decoy." Kevin stared at the clipboard, then at his father, and Leonard saw the confusion in his eyes. The boy who had always been told the truth was about to learn a secret that had been kept for 41 years. "Come with me," Leonard said. The basement was cold and damp, and the single light bulb cast long shadows across the concrete floor. Leonard led Kevin to the far wall, where the boxes of Christmas decorations had been stacked for decades, and he began moving them aside. "What are you doing?" Kevin asked. "Helping." They worked in silence, passing boxes and paint cans, and when the wall was clear, Leonard knelt down and ran his fingers along the edge of the drywall. There was a seam there, invisible unless you knew to look for it, and he pressed on it and the panel swung open on hidden hinges. Kevin took a step back. What the hell? Leonard reached into the cavity and pulled out the safe. It was heavy and his arms shook with the effort, but he set it on the floor and spun the dial and opened the door. The cash, the deed, the letter. He took them out one by one and laid them on the concrete floor. There's $42,000 in cash, he said. There's the original deed to the house. And there's a letter I wrote in 2012, documenting everything your brother did. Kevin knelt down. His hands were shaking. What did Michael do? He took money from our account. A lot of it. Over 12 years, starting in 2000. He forged your mother's signature on checks. He took out a loan in our names and used the money to cover his business debts. Why didn't you say something? Because he's my son, Leonard said. And because I thought he would stop. Did he stop? No. Kevin picked up the letter but did not open it. He held it like it was on fire, his knuckles white, his face pale in the dim light. Dad, this is criminal. I know. Michael could go to prison. I know. Mom, did you know about this? Helen had come down the stairs without either of them noticing. She stood at the bottom, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. I know about everything, she said. Kevin looked at his parents, and Leonard saw the boy's world collapsing behind his eyes. The older brother he had looked up to. The sister he had trusted. The family he had believed was solid and whole. Your brother is not a good person, Helen said, and your sister is not much better. They want the house because they think they deserve it. They think they've earned it because they went to college and got good jobs and drove nice cars. They think we owe them. Don't you? Helen said. We owe them nothing. We raised them. We fed them. We paid for their education. We loved them, and now they're trying to take the only thing we have left. Kevin looked down at the letter in his hands. What do you want me to do? Leonard said. Not yet. But when the time comes, I need you to be ready. Ready for what? To choose. The conservatorship hearing was scheduled for January 15th. Samantha called on New Year's Day to confirm the date, her voice bright and professional, as if she were confirming a dinner reservation. Leonard listened to the message and did not call back. He spent the morning in the basement, checking the safe, making sure everything was still there. The cash, the deed, the letter. He had moved them to a new hiding place now, behind a loose brick in the foundation, because the false panel was no longer a secret. Kevin had come by twice since Christmas, bringing takeout and sitting with them in the living room. He had found a lawyer, a woman named Patricia Okonkwo, who specialized in elder law and had no connection to Samantha's firm. Patricia had reviewed the conservatorship petition and told Leonard that Samantha's case was weak. Her parents had no history of dementia, no diagnosis of incapacity, no evidence of financial mismanagement. But the court would still hear the case, and the process would cost money, and the stress would take a toll. She's hoping you'll settle, Patricia had said. She's hoping the threat is enough. She doesn't know me, Leonard had replied. No, Patricia had said. Apparently she doesn't. The Tuesday before the hearing, Michael came to the house. He did not call first. He simply appeared in the driveway at 7:00 p.m., his black SUV crunching over the gravel, and he walked through the front door without knocking because he still had a key because he had never given it back. Leonard was in the living room watching the news. Helen was in the kitchen doing the dishes by hand because she did not trust the dishwasher. Dad, Michael said. Leonard did not stand up. Michael, we need to talk. Then talk. Michael sat down on the couch across from his father. He was wearing a wool coat that Leonard had never seen before, dark gray, expensive. His shoes were polished. His hair was gray at the temples, distinguished, the look of a man who had succeeded in everything he had tried. Mom, Michael called. Can you come in here? Helen came in, drying her hands on a dish towel. She did not sit down. She stood by the door, her arms crossed, and Leonard saw the same expression she had worn on the Tuesday in November. Recognition. The hearing is next week, Michael said. I want to stop it. Leonard blinked. You do? I do. Samantha is she's going too far. A conservatorship is extreme. I told her that. But you didn't stop her. I'm trying now. Why? Michael leaned forward. He looked at his father, and for a moment Leonard saw the boy he had raised. The boy who had built model airplanes in the basement, who had caught a fish at the lake and carried it home in a bucket, who had hugged him at his high school graduation and said, "Thanks, Dad." Because I don't want to lose you, Michael said. Leonard said nothing. I know I've been aggressive about the trust. I know I've pushed. But I've been thinking, and I realize that we can do this differently. We can wait. We can take our time. There's no rush. Your sister doesn't agree. I'll talk to her. And the conservatorship? I'll tell her to drop it. Helen spoke from the doorway. Why now, Michael? I told you. I don't want to lose you. No, Helen said. That's not the full answer. Michael's jaw tightened. What do you mean? I mean, there's something you're not telling us. The silence stretched. The television played a commercial for a car dealership, and Leonard reached for the remote and turned it off. Michael, he said. What happened? Michael looked down at his hands. They were clean, manicured, the hands of a man who had never worked with them. There's been a problem with my business. A deal fell through. I need some money. How much? 40,000? Leonard felt his chest tighten. $40,000. Short term. I can pay it back in 6 months. I just need a bridge loan. You want us to give you $40,000. I want you to lend it to me. Against the house. So I don't have to involve a bank. Helen stepped forward. Her voice was cold, level, precise. Michael, do you think we have $40,000? You have the house. You can take out a HELOC, a home equity line of credit. You'd qualify for 100,000 easily. I just need 40. We're not taking out a loan against the house. Mom, I'm asking for help. And we're saying no. Michael stood up. His face had changed, the mask slipping, and Leonard saw the desperation beneath. If you don't help me, I'm gonna lose everything. My business. My house. My family. That's not our problem, Helen said. Mom! That's not our problem, Michael. You made choices. You took risks. You forged our signatures and stole from us, and now you want us to save you. The words hung in the air like a guillotine. Michael's face went white. What did you say? You heard me. That's not true. 2012, Leonard said. The loan. The forged signatures. The account you drained over 12 years. We know everything, Michael. We've always known. Michael took a step back. His hands were shaking. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. I came here to help you. You came here to save yourself. Helen walked to the front door and opened it. The cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of snow. Leave, she said. Mom, leave. Now. And don't come back until you're ready to tell the truth. Michael stood in the middle of the living room, his expensive coat and his polished shoes and his desperate eyes, and for a moment Leonard felt sorry for him. The boy who had wanted everything and ended up with nothing. The son who had traded his family for a business and lost both. I'm sorry, Michael said, but he did not say what he was sorry for. He walked out the door and Helen closed it behind him, and Leonard sat alone in the silence, listening to the SUV's engine fade into the night. The hearing was postponed. Patricia Okonkwo called on January 14th to tell them that Samantha had withdrawn the petition. No explanation, no apology, just a one-page filing with the court, signed by Samantha herself, stating that the matter had been resolved. It's not over, Patricia said. She'll try again, but for now, you have breathing room. Leonard thanked her and hung up. He sat at the kitchen table, looking at the scar where Kevin had dropped the skillet in 1994, and he thought about what came next. Helen came in with 2 cups of tea and sat across from him. She set the cups down and took his hands in hers. What are we going to do? She asked. I don't know. We can't stay here forever. I know. They're gonna come back. I know. Leonard looked at the basement door. The clipboard hung on its hook, 218 names, a life's work reduced to wood and paper. And behind it, behind the false panel he had built in 1983, behind the boxes and the paint cans, the safe waited with its secrets. Maybe we should sell, he said. Helen's eyes widened. Sell? To Kevin, quietly, before they can do anything about it. He doesn't have the money. He doesn't need the money. We can gift it to him. Put it in his name. When we're gone, the house is his, and Michael and Samantha can't touch it. And where would we live? Same as always. He'd let us stay. Helen was silent for a long time. She picked up the framed photograph from the windowsill her first dental office, 1977, and looked at it with an expression Leonard had seen 1,000 times. Pride, nostalgia, gratitude. I don't want to leave, she said. Neither do I, but I don't want to fight forever either. Leonard squeezed her hands. Then we talked to Kevin. Tomorrow. Kevin came at noon and they told him everything. The safe, the cash, the deed, the letter, the plan to transfer the house to him quietly before the next hearing. Kevin listened without interrupting, his face unreadable, and when Leonard finished, he sat back in his chair and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Dad, I can't take the house. Why not? Because it's not fair to Michael and Samantha. They don't deserve it. Maybe not. But I don't deserve it either. None of us do. It's your house, you and Mom. You earned it. We're trying to protect it. And I understand that. But there's got to be another way. Leonard looked at his son and he saw something he had not expected. Integrity. The boy who had always been the weakest, the quietest, the most uncertain, was the one who refused to take what was not his. "What do you suggest?" Helen asked. Kevin leaned forward. "Let me talk to them. Let me try to mediate. If we can find a solution that works for everyone." "There is no solution that works for everyone," Leonard said. "Your brother is in debt. Your sister is greedy. They will never agree to anything that doesn't benefit them." "Then let me try anyway. And if you fail?" Kevin met his father's eyes. "Then you do what you have to do." Kevin called a meeting for the following Saturday. He chose a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown, halfway between his siblings' offices and his parents' house. He told Michael and Samantha that their parents would not be there, that this was a conversation between siblings, and that they needed to come without lawyers. Michael arrived first, wearing another expensive vest over another expensive shirt. He looked tired, Leonard would later learn, his eyes shadowed, his hands jittery from too much coffee and too little sleep. Samantha arrived second, her briefcase in hand, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had not withdrawn the conservatorship petition out of kindness. She had withdrawn it because Patricia Okonkwo had filed a motion for sanctions, and Samantha's firm had advised her to step back before she damaged her career. Kevin sat at a table in the back, a notebook in front of him, and waited for his siblings to sit down. "Thank you for coming," he said. "What's this about?" Samantha asked. "It's about Mom and Dad. We know about Mom and Dad. We've been trying to help them. You've been trying to take their house." Samantha's face tightened. "That's not—" "Don't," Kevin said. "Just don't. I've seen the papers. I've talked to their lawyer. I know exactly what you've been doing." Michael shifted in his seat. "Kevin, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Samantha filed a conservatorship petition. "You asked them for a loan against the house. Both of you have been pressuring them for months to sign over their assets. We're trying to protect them." "From what?" "From taxes, from nursing homes, from themselves?" Kevin shook his head. "They don't need protection. They need respect." Samantha opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. "You don't know the full picture, Kevin. Mom and Dad are vulnerable. They're getting older. They need someone to manage their affairs. They have each other. That's not enough. Then they have me." Samantha stared at him. Me? I'm going to help them. And I'm going to make sure that neither of you touches their house." Michael's voice rose. "You can't do that." "I can. They've offered to transfer the house to me. I turned them down. But if you keep pushing, I'll change my mind. They can't transfer the house without our consent. They can gift it to me, and if they do, you can fight it in court, but you'll lose. Because they're competent. They have medical records. They have a lawyer. And I have proof that you've been trying to coerce them." Samantha's face went pale. "What proof?" Kevin opened his notebook. "I have recordings of phone calls, copies of emails, texts, and a letter Dad wrote in 2019, right after you first asked him for a loan. He described how you manipulated him, how you threatened to cut off contact if he didn't help you buy that house in the Hamptons. The one you sold last year for a profit, Samantha, the profit you never shared with him." Samantha's hand trembled as she closed the folder. "That's not admissible." "Maybe not, but it's enough for a story, enough for a lawsuit, enough for the family friends to know exactly what kind of people you are." Kevin's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "I don't want to use it. I want us to walk out of here and find a way to be a family again, but I won't let you destroy them." Michael looked at Samantha. Samantha looked at the table. "What do you want?" Michael asked. "I want you to sign a document. It's a simple agreement. You both promise not to pursue any legal action against Mom and Dad for their assets. In exchange, they will set up a trust for you, a small one, equal shares. When they pass, you get what's left after their care. How small? Enough to pay off your debts, Michael. Enough to keep you from making stupid investments, Samantha. It's not a fortune, but it's fair." Michael's jaw tightened. "And if we don't sign, then I release everything to the media. I file a restraining order. I make sure every lawyer in this city knows what you tried to do. And I spend every penny I have fighting you until you have nothing left." Samantha's eyes filled with tears, not of regret, but of rage. "You're blackmailing us. I'm protecting them." "There's a difference." The coffee shop buzzed around, the hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of conversations, the clink of cups. In the back corner, three siblings sat in silence, the weight of years pressing down on them. Finally, Michael reached for the pen. The document was signed on a Tuesday. By Thursday, Leonard had framed it and hung it in his study, not out of pride, but as a reminder of what his children had become and of what his youngest had saved him from. Kevin stayed in the city for 3 more weeks. He helped his mother with her physical therapy, drove his father to his appointments, and sat with them in the evenings, watching old movies and talking about nothing important. The house began to feel like a home again, not a battlefield, but a refuge. But karma, as Kevin had learned, does not forget. On a Friday morning in early November, Michael's company went under. The investors pulled out. The board voted him out. And the debt he had been hiding, the gambling losses, the bad loans, the second mortgage on his own house came crashing down around him. He called Kevin at 2 a.m, his voice thin and broken. "I don't know what to do," he said. "They're going to take everything." Kevin listened. He did not say, "I told you so." He did not say, "You deserve this." He simply said, "Come home. We'll figure it out." Michael came home with his tail between his legs. He slept in his childhood bedroom, wore his father's old bathrobe, and ate his mother's cooking without complaint. He did not mention the house or the trust or the conservatorship. He simply existed, humbled and hollowed out. Samantha's karma came later in a quieter form. Her firm was acquired by a larger corporation, and in the restructuring she was demoted. Her title remained, but her power vanished. She was given a corner office on a lower floor, a smaller budget, and a team of junior associates who did not respect her. The condescension she had shown her parents was returned to her in small, daily doses: a snide comment in a meeting, a forgotten invitation, a promotion handed to someone younger and hungrier. She did not call Kevin. She did not call anyone. She simply worked, day after day, in the silence of her diminished life. But the final blow came from an unexpected ally. Patricia Okonkwo had not forgotten Samantha's conservatorship petition. She had not forgotten the way Samantha had tried to steamroll her, the way she had implied that Leonard and Lane were incompetent simply because they were old. Patricia had been practicing elder law for 20 years, and she had a long memory. She filed a complaint with the State Bar Association. It was not a criminal charge, and it did not result in disbarment, but it triggered an investigation, and the investigation uncovered a pattern. Samantha had used similar tactics with 2 other elderly clients, pushing them toward guardianship when their families had resisted. The clients had been wealthy, the fees had been large, and Samantha had been the beneficiary. The bar issued a formal reprimand, her firm placed her on probation, and the legal career she had built with such careful ambition began to crumble. Kevin heard about it from his mother, who heard it from a friend at the country club. He did not gloat. He did not call Samantha to say, "I told you so." He simply nodded, and then he went back to packing, because it was time to go home. Kevin returned to the farmhouse on a Thursday afternoon in early December. The sky was low and gray, the fields bare and frozen. The gravel driveway crunched under his tires as he pulled up to the house, and for a long moment he sat in the car, just looking at it. The porch light was on. The curtains were drawn. A thin curl of smoke rose from the chimney. He had told his parents he would be back before Christmas, but he had not told them exactly when. He wanted it to be a surprise. He wanted to see their faces when he walked through the door. He grabbed his bag from the trunk and walked up the steps. The wood creaked under his boots, the same creak he had heard as a child, running down the stairs on Christmas morning, chasing the smell of bacon and coffee. He opened the door. The house was warm. The fire was crackling in the hearth. And his mother was sitting in her armchair, a book open in her lap, her glasses perched on her nose. She looked up. She saw him, and her face broke into a smile so wide, so pure that Kevin felt his chest tighten. "Kevin," she said. "Hi, Mom." She set down the book and stood up, slowly, her knees creaking. She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him, and Kevin let himself be held. "You didn't tell us you were coming," she said. "I wanted to surprise you." "You did." "You surprised me." She pulled back and looked at him, her eyes wet. "You look tired." "I'm fine. I needed to be here. Your father's in the barn. He's been fixing the tractor. He'll be so happy to see you." Kevin smiled. "I'll go find him." But he did not move. He stood in the doorway of the house he had grown up in, the house he had almost lost, and he let the silence settle around him. The clock on the mantel ticked. The fire popped. The kettle on the stove began to whistle. "I'll make tea," his mother said. "You stay as long as you want." That evening, Kevin and his father sat on the porch, despite the cold. Leonard had wrapped himself in an old wool blanket, and Kevin had pulled a chair close to the railing, where the wind was blocked by the eaves. They watched the stars emerge, one by one, from the darkening sky. "I got a letter from Michael yesterday," Leonard said. "Oh?" He apologized. Said he was sorry for everything. Said he was going to get help. Kevin nodded. He did not ask if his father had forgiven him. That was not a question he needed answered. "And Samantha?" he asked. "She sent a text." 3 words. "I am sorry." Leonard paused. "I wrote back. I said I know. That's more than she deserves. Maybe. But it's what I needed to say." They sat in silence for a long time. The wind picked up, rattling the dry leaves in the yard. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called out. "I'm proud of you," Leonard said. Kevin looked at his father. For what? For being the one who came back. For being the one who fought for us. For not giving up. I almost did, but you didn't. Kevin did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. He simply sat and watched the stars and let his father's words settle into his bones. The next morning, Kevin woke early. The house was still quiet. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the frost-covered fields in shades of pink and gold. He made coffee, put on his boots, and walked out to the barn. The old tractor was there, half dismantled, tools scattered across the workbench. His father had been working on the carburetor, and the parts were laid out in careful order, each bolt and gasket placed with the precision of a man who had spent his life fixing things. Kevin picked up a wrench and got to work. He did not think about Michael or Samantha or the conservatorship or the lawyers. He did not think about the recordings or the documents or the threats he had made. He did not think about the money or the house or the future. He thought about the engine in front of him, the carburetor, the way the parts fit together or did not, and the satisfaction of making them work again. His father found him an hour later, covered in grease, the carburetor rebuilt and resting on the workbench. "You did it," Leonard said. "I had help." "No, you didn't. I was asleep." Kevin laughed. "Well, I had a good teacher." Leonard picked up the carburetor and inspected it, turning it over in his hands. "Looks good. Better than I could have done." "Doubt that." "Don't doubt it. I'm old." "My hands shake." He set the carburetor down. "But yours don't. You've got steady hands, Kevin. You always did." Kevin wiped his hands on a rag. "What does that mean?" "It means you're not afraid to get your hands dirty. You're not afraid to do the work." "That's rare." Kevin did not respond. He did not know how. Later that week, Kevin found something in the attic. He had been looking for Christmas decorations his mother wanted to put up the tree, and the boxes were stored in the crawl space above the garage. He had climbed up with a flashlight, and as he moved boxes aside, his hand brushed against something smooth and cold. It was a small wooden box, no bigger than a shoebox, with a brass latch and a faded engraving on the lid. He carried it downstairs and opened it at the kitchen table. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a silver locket. He recognized it immediately. It had belonged to his grandmother, his father's mother, the woman he had never met, the one who had died before he was born. His father had told him stories about her, how she had fled war-torn Europe with nothing but a suitcase, how she had built a new life in a new country, how she had never complained, not once, not ever. The locket was tarnished, the chain broken. But when Kevin opened it, he found a photograph inside, a young woman with dark eyes and a serious face, holding a baby in her arms. His father? He turned the locket over. On the back, engraved in tiny letters, were the words, "For the ones who stay." Kevin sat at the table, the locket in his hands, and felt something shift inside him. He did not know what the words meant. He did not know who had engraved them, or when, or why. But he knew, with a certainty that surprised him, that they were meant for him. That night, Kevin sat by the fire with his parents. His mother was knitting a scarf, he thought, though it was hard to tell. His father was reading a book about the history of tractors. The television was off. The house was quiet. "Dad," Kevin said. Leonard looked up. "I found something in the attic today. A locket. It belonged to your mother." Leonard's face went still. "You found it." "I did. I thought I'd lost that years ago." Kevin pulled the locket from his pocket and held it out. Leonard took it, his hands trembling, and opened it. He looked at the photograph for a long time. "That's me," he said. "When I was 6 months old, I figured. She carried this locket with her everywhere. She said it reminded her why she kept going." Kevin waited. "She died when I was 12. Cancer." "She didn't suffer long, but she suffered enough." Leonard closed the locket and held it in his palm. "She gave this to me on her deathbed. She said one day, you'll need to remember why you stay. And then she died." "I'm sorry," Kevin said. "Don't be." "It was a long time ago." Leonard handed the locket back. "You keep it. She would have liked you." Kevin took the locket. He did not put it around his neck. He did not put it in his pocket. He simply held it, feeling the weight of it in his hand, and wondered what his grandmother would have thought of all of this, the fighting, the betrayal, the long road back. He thought she would have understood. On Christmas Eve, the house filled with light. Kevin had strung garlands along the banister, hung wreaths on the doors, and set up the tree in the corner of the living room. His mother had baked cookies. His father had lit the fire. And together, the three of them had decorated the tree with ornaments that had been in the family for generations: glass baubles from his mother's childhood, wooden stars that his father carved, a tarnished angel that had once belonged to his grandmother. It was not a perfect Christmas. It was not the Christmas they had planned or hoped or dreamed of, but it was theirs, and for Kevin that was enough. At midnight, after his parents had gone to bed, Kevin sat alone in the living room. The fire had burned down to embers. The tree lights flickered. The house was silent, save for the creak of the settling foundation and the whisper of the wind outside. He took out the locket again. He opened it. He looked at the photograph of his father as a baby, held in the arms of a woman he would never know, and he thought about staying. He thought about the farmhouse, and the fields, and the tractor in the barn. He thought about his mother's tea and his father's silence and the long, slow rhythms of life in the country. He thought about the siblings who had betrayed him, and the parents who had loved him, and the woman in the photograph who had carried a locket with her everywhere, just to remind herself why she kept going. He closed the locket and slipped it into his pocket. He did not know what the new year would bring. He did not know if Michael would get better, or if Samantha would find her way back, or if the family would ever be whole again. But he knew one thing. He was going to stay. In the kitchen, on the counter, next to the cookie jar, there was a small note that Kevin had not noticed before. It was written on a scrap of paper, torn from a notebook, in handwriting he did not recognize. It read, "I am sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I wanted you to know that I am trying." It was not signed. Kevin read it 3 times. He did not recognize the handwriting. He did not know who had written it, or when, or how it had gotten there. But he knew. He folded the note and tucked it into the locket, next to the photograph of his father and his grandmother. Then he walked to the window and looked out at the frozen fields, the bare trees, the cold and silent night. The stars were out. The house was warm. And somewhere, in the darkness, something was waiting to be born.